After Jenkins waived his right to a jury trial, a three-judge panel makes a ruling. This panel finds the death penalty is appropriate, should be, and is hereby given for each of the four murders by the defendant. An additional 450 years was also tacked onto his sentence, the result of numerous weapons charges. Nico Jenkins would later appeal his death sentence, but it was rejected by the Nebraska Supreme Court. As for the family members involved in the crimes, his sister Erica Jenkins was sentenced to life in prison for her involvement in the murders. Cousin Christine Bordeaux, who turned state's evidence and testified against her family, was given 20 years. Uncle Warren Levering received 40 years, and his mother, Lori Jenkins, was given 2 years for accessory charges. We're in Clackamas County Courthouse in Oregon City, Oregon. Ronald Strasser's in court today, facing a charge of trespassing.
All right, can you hear me now? Yeah, there we go. Okay. All right, so as we look over here, we'll see that this, if we look at the chart, what I've tried to do is show that what happens if you are below the nisab. So this is the nisab line, this is the minimum threshold. And if once you drop below the minimum threshold, then this is when zakat is not due on the individual. So basically, if you follow the Hanafi opinion, then this individual actually pays zakat, right? Because at the beginning of the fiscal year, he was above nisab. And then at the end of the fiscal year, he's still above nisab. What would happen is for the Ḥanbalis, he would not pay, his threshold would start again here, right? His threshold will start again here because now he's above nisab and you have to wait a year from this point for him to pay again. In this situation where it's blue, all of these individuals would pay, right? There's an agreed upon, there's a ijma' that this individual will pay because he was above nisab the entire time. So zakat of livestock. So this is the table. Basically, if you have 1 to 4, you don't pay any. When you have 5, you pay sheep. If you have 10 to 14, you pay 2 sheep. If you have 10 to 19, or I'm sorry, 15 to 19, you pay 3 sheep, etc. to the end. Unfortunately, this isn't that clear because there's just like a really big, what do you call it, spreadsheet. And what happens at, I think when you reach 25, when you reach 25 camels, that's when you actually start paying in camels. So it'll either be a 1-year-old female or it will be a 2-year-old male. And then after that, depending on how many you add on, then at that point, you will start adding more camels to that. Cows, here we go. It doesn't, this is basically what the breakdown is. You don't pay zakat until you reach 30 cows. And then after that, it's like 30 to 39, 40 to 59, 60. The biggest gap is here. So what would happen is you start paying 2, and then over here you pay 2 animals of 2 different ages, and here 2 of the same age, and so on and so forth. I don't think we have too many people who own animals here. Sheep is pretty easy. Basically, you start getting taxed at 40, and then from 40 to 120, and then 120 to 200, and then 200 and every 100, so on and so forth. These are the types of animals that are rejected. They are not accepted for zakat. Male goats, if the animal is one-eyed, very old, basically if it has a major defect, right? If the animal has a major defect, it will be rejected for zakat. If it is a new mother or still nursing, because this is considered inhumane for the animal because it is a type of, you're taking it away from its mother. If an animal is pregnant or an animal being prepared for slaughter because there's a specific purpose for that animal. And this is why this animal is not to be taken for zakat. It doesn't mean that these animals can't be slaughtered, even that. So if an animal is pregnant, and I slaughter the mother, what is the ruling on the fetus? No. You guys know? If I slaughter a pregnant sheep and I cut up the sheep and I take out the fetus, you can eat it, right? Because you slaughtered the mother and it's still considered inside of the womb. So for those of you who like really lean veal, it might be a way of eating the fetus of the animal. So basically the idea is when the tax collector comes around to collect the animals, an individual should give the average valued animal, because sometimes the people who have animals, right, they have very good breeds and they have lower breeds. So just look at what is average between those breeds, and that is the value that he should put forward. There are different animals that can be replaced for different situations. Sometimes if I have a sick flock, or sometimes I have only males in my flock, or sometimes I only have females in my flock. Females isn't a problem, but sometimes I only have males in my flock. Those are different situations, and those are exceptional cases, and replacements are allowed when it's tax time. If you have a mixture of animals, like we said, you just give the value, the average value of that animal. If I have joint ownership, if I have, for example, less than the nisab and my partner has more than the nisab, and together we actually have to pay more, then according to the madhāhib, like we said, that if you can be taxed, you will, right? And there will be different ways to get taxed in the madhāhib. From that is joint ownership. This is something that the Shafi'iyya, they share with us. The Malikiyya, they say that if each of the owners reaches nisab independently, then that is the only time that you would pay the zakat. But if one owner is less than nisab and one is more, then only the person with the nisab would actually pay the tax. And that would be calculated based on the percentage of ownership. So if you have a very small number and your partner has a large number, and both of you, when you combine, you actually get above the nisab, you just give a percentage of your ownership in the corporation. Produce. These are the things that grow from the earth and they grow from the land. So there are three things that come from the earth: crops, metals, and treasure troves. How these are dealt with, it depends on the madhāhib. So in the Hanabila, basically, when it comes to plants, there are three ways or three things that is very important. Number one, that is measured by volume. Number two, that it can be stored. And number three, it has to be at least 5 osuk. And we'll talk about how much that is, inshallah. But it being stored, like what? What is he talking about?
Dates,
Right, like dates. Like these are things that you could put into long-term storage: barley, grains, rice. Like what about apples, cucumbers, tomatoes? Huh? They'll go bad, right? So all of these things that cannot be stored. Like what about potatoes?
Go around.
Right, potatoes will go bad too. Right, they can't be put in for long-term storage. So basically anything that cannot be put into long-term storage will not have zakat on it. Like, how is that fair? Can we get money? So how do we get money out of the guy who grows apples or oranges, or he only has fruits and vegetables? Is there a way to get money out of him or no?
Honestly, there is, because you just get it before he stores it.
He can't store it. There's no long-term storage for it. Right, it goes bad. We already agreed on that.
During harvest.
Huh?
During harvest.
Harvest again. It's not, remember, we said the condition is it has to be able to be stored. So I'm an apple farmer. I have an apple orchard and I have 5 osuk, and apples are measured by volume, but I can't store it. So do I give zakat on it?
Yes,
Yes, I do. How?
the equivalent in monetary
Okay.
ways, like if you sell it and then you,
Right, there it is, right? If I sell it, I no longer treat it as a crop, I treat it as arud al-tijara, I treat it as merchandise. Right? So now that I've treated it like merchandise, the taxing is different. The taxing is different. And we'll talk about what the taxation is here. So like we said, the taxable plants, the Malikiyya, they actually mentioned 20 specific types of plants that can be taxed. Like, and they said outside of that, it cannot. And when we talk about taxation here, what do we talk about zakat here? It's a very specific type of zakat, and we'll get to that. The Shafi'iyya, they said anything that's non-perishable. Anything that's non-perishable. The Hanabila, they went even further, and they said this. The Hanabila, they went further. They said anything that is measured is non-perishable. And the Hanafis, this is unrestricted. Basically, anything that grows. Anything that grows can be taxed. The nisab is 5 osuk. 5 osuk is approximately 653 kilograms. So if you are harvesting close to, if you're harvesting about 650 kilograms, then at that point you would give zakat on this. And how much zakat do you give? If it is naturally irrigated, by rain, if it's naturally irrigated by a river or by a lake or whatever, then you give 10%. You give 10%. And if it is artificially irrigated meaning that I have to bring water and I have to pump water every time, every season, then I pay 5%. And how is this different from the regular zakat rate? How much is the regular zakat rate? 2.5%, right? The regular zakat rate is 2.5%. So even where I am working toward the plants and watering them, I still pay double of what the normal rate is, quadruple of what it is if it is naturally irrigated. Like, what if some of the year I naturally irrigate and some of the year I artificially irrigate? I actually treat it as this. I treat it as artificially irrigated. So like we said, if it's mixed, if any portion of the season is artificially irrigated, then it is treated as such. And this is in the madhab. The Shafi'is, they say that at least half the season has to be irrigated artificially in order for that to happen. So if 75% of the time I'm naturally irrigating and 25% of the time I'm artificially irrigating, the Ḥanbalis will tax it according to this rate, and the Shafis will tax it according to this rate. Any questions? Any of you farmers? Any of you farmers that grow grains? So tax time. If the fruits are unripe or the harvest is unripe, I won't say fruits. If the harvest is unripe, can I take the tax on them?
Yes.
No, this is not taxable. If the harvest is ripe, yes. So the tax is now binding. I don't have to give it yet. Okay? It's binding right now. I don't give it yet. So if it's once it's stored, once it's stored, meaning that it's been sheathed and it's been cleaned. So I took the sheath off or whatever it might be, if it's if it's barley, I grind it or whatever the case might be, and I prepare it for storage. Once I prepare it for storage, I have to give the tax now. So you guys see the difference between these two? Like it becomes wajib here that this is now I have to give it. But over here, I actually have to distribute it. You guys following or no? I see some confusion. When the harvest is ripe over here, now I am responsible in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I have to measure it. Over here, this is when I have to distribute. This is when I actually have to give it away. The moment I bring it into storage. Okay? But what if a calamity strikes? What if a calamity strikes here? Do I have to give zakat? No, there's no zakat. What if a calamity strikes here? So what if I did it out of negligence? Like I'm just lazy, and then a calamity came and destroyed my crops. At this point, I have to pay. It's taxable. What if I did my due diligence? What if like the time was coming and I was getting ready to harvest and a calamity came and destroyed everything? Then it's not taxable. What if I have it in my stores? If I have it in my stores and I'm negligent, what happens? I have to pay. What if I just like left it? I didn't take care of it and it got destroyed.
Like what is?
I still have to pay. So once it gets here, once it gets to this phase, it doesn't matter what happens. I have to pay. I have to pay. Over here, this is where there's a difference. Right? Over here is where there's the difference. So after it's sheathed and dried, like we said, whether it be barley or oats or rice, whatever the case might be, once I sheathe it and dry it, at that point, it becomes an obligation to distribute. If I sell them before I distribute, then giving the cash substitute is permissible. Only the crop owner pays the tax. So if I gift you 5 osel of rice, do you have to give the tax? No. Why? Because you didn't actually harvest it. Every type is calculated independently, but species can be grouped. What are we talking about here?
Animals like cows.
No, we're not talking about animals. We're talking about plants. Animals were done. So, for example, rice. Rice is a type. Is there only one type of rice? What if I grow jasmine, basmati, Thai rice, and Egyptian rice? How do I treat those? Do I treat those as one type of rice or do I treat them independently? I'm sorry? So I classify those as a type, right? Even though they're different species. So each species can be taxed at 10% regardless of the amount, as long as the total is above the nisab. Yeah, so they can you don't separate them. Like dates. Is there only one species of dates? No, there's like a whole bunch of different, right? There's like khalas, there's amba, there's rutub, there's sukkari, right? So you have all these different species of dates. what I would do is I would gather them all together. And see how much they weigh as a total. Then, based on how much, if I have like, 100 kilos of this, 200 kilos of that, 50 of this, I would take percentages out, ideally percentages of each, and then I would give that as zakat. Or I can just mix them and take 10% out for zakat, depending on how serious it is. They mined goods. There's a difference of opinion on mined goods. So gold and silver are the only ones that the Maliki and the Shafi'iyya considered. Impressionable metals like tin, copper, iron, all of these, and for the Hanafis would also be considered. For the Ḥanbalis would be anything valuable, even diamonds, amethyst, etc. And it's after it's refined, not just the raw material from the ground when it's actually refined and cleaned. Like, so what about the sea? Does it take the same ruling? And do we find things in the sea, like pearls? Right, there are things that we find in the sea. Does that take the same ruling as mine?
No.
No, it doesn't, right? It's not analogous to mining, and just all the madhāhib agree on this. All the madhāhib agree on this, but there are some contradictory opinions, according to Abu Yusuf, and the minority opinion in the Ḥanbali madhab. These are also taxable. So when a person collects pearls, he's also taxed on those pearls. So are these taxed normally or as a treasure tax? A normal tax is going to be 2.5%. Treasure tax is 20%. Why do you guys think there's a difference?
Maybe because treasure maybe because you get more, or
You can. I mean, it's not necessary you get more. Did I have to work for treasure?
no.
No, I don't, right? Like treasure is something I just happen to come across and I find this treasure. So that's why the tax is significantly higher. And there's no hold, there's no time period. The moment I get it, I have to give 20%. These tax normally, they're 2.5% because of the efforts that I actually put into mining those goods. So if the value is above 85 grams of gold, it is taxed normally, meaning at 2.5%, whether it be oil, gold, silver, diamonds, etc., and taxed as treasure regardless of the amount. This is the Hanafi opinion. Pagan treasure, 20% of it is taxed. It is owned immediately. As soon as a Muslim finds a Jahili treasure, as soon as he finds pagan treasure, he can take ownership of it and gives 20% of the value. If it is owned by a Muslim, then it must be announced for a year. After that, he gives 20% of the value. Currency. Currency is always an interesting subject to discuss. The reason is, what is currency? What do you guys think? Huh? From the state? A form of payment. Okay, currency is a form of payment. Absolutely right. What can it be?
It can be anything that's, I guess, for instance, like a United States, the currency is the dollar bill. So it's
Okay. So the dollar is what we use in the US. Can we have other types of currency? Can, in some cultures, they use shells?
Yeah.
Right? So there's no, is there any dictation in the Sharia that currency must be like this? But what is our currency based off of, usually? Dinar and dirham, which is essentially what? Gold and silver. Right? Gold and silver. Or anything that can take its place. But the baseline for Islamic finance is going to revolve around, when it comes to currency, gold and silver. Very simple. What about modern currency? Where does it fall? We said if everything goes back to gold and silver, what do we base modern currency off of? Gold or silver? Or something else?
I'll say gold and silver.
Gold and silver together? No, which one? It has to be one or two, one of the two. Either gold or silver. Gold? Okay, why? Silver? Why? What do you guys think? So it should be likened to silver. In the madhab, there's both, right? there's they're equal weight, right? It can either be considered silver or it can be considered gold. Why? These are the reasons. It's better for the poor because it has a lower threshold. It allows more people to participate in giving zakat. And also, it is not a burden, right? 2.5% of $500 is like $10, right? It's not a big deal. It should be likened to gold. This is the majority opinion. Why? Because you cannot obligate on a lower value. Does that make sense? Like if you were to obligate something, then you have to set it to the highest threshold possible. You can't set it to the lower one, especially when you have a choice. But historically, the dollar was based off of what? What was it tied to? What was it?
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Okay. So like we said, you can't obligate something on a lower value, or should it be treated separately altogether? And this is a conversation that I think is important. I don't know anybody who treats it completely differently, because if you treat it completely differently, there are two things that it would actually cause problems with. It'll cause problems with zakat, and it'll also cause problems when we start talking about what? Riba. Right? So these are the two major, and these are two major issues in Islam, right? Zakat and riba. One is clearly obligated and the other one is clearly impermissible. And that's why both of these things have an effect and they have a role. And that's why it's important to understand how to deal with currency. And there are some scholars who do hold that currency should be traded separately altogether, because they say it's not really backed by anything. And it's just like a random creation. What is the minimum threshold? For gold, it is 85 grams. And for silver, it is 595 grams. I think this is around like $4,100 or something. And I think this is around like $700. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly. But I think those are the latest thresholds. Combining currencies. What happens if I have a mix of currencies? So if I have gold, silver plus cash, within the madhāhib, there is a difference of opinion. Some of the Ḥanbalis say that an individual actually has to give zakat by combining them, and some say no, as if they each individually do not reach nisab, you don't have to give it. According to the Shafi'is, you do not combine. Jewelry is not taxable according to the majority, as long as it is permissible and it is being used. Gold utensils, for example, would be taxed because they are haram. The Hanafis and the Zahiris, they say that gold jewelry is taxable, that you have to give zakat on them. Debts is a much longer conversation, and I think I'm going to leave that for next time, inshallah. Do we have any questions before we end today, or any questions online? I changed the mic. We had a bit of an issue that has been corrected, alhamdulillah. Sure.
Should we pray our sunnah prayers?
Should we pray our sunnah prayers quickly?
Yes.
No. But why would you want to pray them quickly?
I heard it, but I heard it, so I was wondering that.
You heard that you should pray them quickly?
Yeah.
If anything, I think sunnah prayers we should take our time with, and the fard prayers, if in congregation, should be relatively quickly. And the reason for that is because there is a congregation of people behind us and we don't know what their situation is. Any other questions? You guys got pretty bored with zakat. You guys didn't like hearing about plants and livestock? So interesting.
My question was going to be about debt, but it's next week, so.
Yeah, no, we'll talk about that next week, inshallah.
Okay.
What is like the ruling on closing your eyes so that helps you?
Sure. So there are three ways to pray: by closing your eyes, looking at the place of sajda, and actually looking straight ahead, as comes in the Maliki madhab. All of these are acceptable. I think it's important to make sure that we pray in a way that brings us closer to Allah and brings us khushu'. I think some of the madhāhib dislike closing the eyes during prayer, but nobody says it's not permissible. Any other questions? No, that's it. خلاص. I will see you guys for the tazkiyah class, inshallah. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Subhanaka wa bihamdik wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.